another week in social distancing and hand washing. It is Monday. We are starting a brand new unit. We are progressing past the natural selection unit. Most of you have done really well. We are going to check in on the global pandemic, and we have a guest lecturer today. Mr. Stone and Mrs. Stone live in Fayetteville, so they've had an opportunity to go into the woods and actually view some of the natural ecology that is going on around us. So we will have an opportunity to hear from them for their guest lecture. And then we will see exactly what's going on with the rest of our riddle and scientist of the day. Your riddle of the day, a couple of throughs. Global pandemic totals. This is just, the good news is if you take a look here, that is a decline. That is a leveling off in round one of the global numbers. So that is globally the top of the hump. We'll have to see if the U.S. is near that hump yet. We do not know this yet. As of April 19th, 2.3 million plus. The counts are so big, they are losing track. Reported deaths over 159,000. In the U.S., 746,000 cases. We are approaching our first million, meaning we have close to a third of the cases globally. And 35,000 fatalities. Again, we are beginning to round numbers as well. Arkansas is reporting 1,781 with 40 documented fatalities. I say documented because we are only reporting individuals that tested positive before they passed away. That's why our numbers are so low. We'll sort that out later. I think it's a flaw in the documentation. Let's take a look at our goals. Answer your checking question. I want to hear from you today. There's a question on there that I'm adding for short answer for you to just say, hey, if you need help with something, if you want to reach out to me, no one else will see the answer. I'm just posting for you a check-in question. So is there anything you need from me? Anything I can be doing better for you? Can I help you out with tutoring more? Do you need some one-on-one time for me to help you out? There's a lot of things that I'm willing to do to help you guys succeed in this new unit and with remediation in the past unit. We do have a few students who are still struggling with the natural selection, and I'd be happy to help them out. So I'll be scheduling with you, you schedule with me, we'll reach out to each other, we'll get you through that unit. I'll be posting the vocab for the ecology section, where it's springtime. We are studying the outdoors. It's going to be wonderful. We're going to actually engage with nature a little bit. I'm actually going to share with you today a video from Mr. Stone and his family and Mrs. Stone, who went out and did an adventure in the woods talking about succession. Succession is the idea that when you work your way from a bare surface with no life on it, an abiotic environment, if you will, then certain kinds of life have to appear before others can. They're establishment species. They're beginning species. If you start with a parking lot and you abandon it over time, you will eventually end up with a forest. That's the idea that we're talking about. So I will hand it over temporarily to Mr. Stone.
What is up, guys? Mr. Stone here for this first video of this unit. So this entire unit's ecology, right? So we're going to be out in the environment talking about abiotic factors, biotic factors, living things, dead things. We're going to talk about ecosystems. But this unit, this section of the unit, we're talking primarily about succession, about how you have organisms that basically help start everything you see around you. So we are just outside of Devil's Den State Park, and the primary focus with this succession video is talking about primary and secondary succession and the organisms that help create those things. All of the environment that we have around us, whether you're talking about mountains or prairies or plains or forests, they all have to start somewhere. And that starts with basically what I'm sitting on, a rock. So you have one rock. Say we have this giant rock of an earth. And before anything can take place, before anything can grow on it, you have to have soil. Soil is a huge component. It provides nutrients, it helps store the water that the plants can take in. It is there to help grow much larger things than we have now. So first thing you have when you're talking about a new ecosystem is a bare rock. So the rocks that we're talking about, a lot of the ones you see around us are already broken down. But from the very beginning that we're talking about is typically from volcanic rock formation. So you have a volcano that's going to spew this hot magma all over the ground, and that is a basically untouched starting point for the environment to take hold. And volcanic rock is particularly nutritious for plants. It's got a lot of nutrients in it. So again, it's broken down by lichen and mosses. It has a huge impact on the types of plants that grow there. And so right after you have the rock, you have pioneer species. And a pioneer species is just one of the, basically, like the pioneers when you talk about back whenever we were, the 49ers, how they're pioneers and moving across to the west.
Right on time. Moving along the lonely road through Indian country, heading west. Ha! Ha!
It's something or someone that's there first. And so when we're talking about ecosystems, the pioneer species that we deal with are lichens and mosses. And so you can see here on this rock that I am, it's covered in lichens. And a lichen is basically just a fungi and algae that is secreting acids that will result in this rock getting broken down to smaller rocks, and eventually it's going to break down in the soil. But lichens aren't the only things that are pioneer species. You also have mosses. So a moss is doing the same thing. It's breaking down the rock, creating soil, all with a goal of allowing more organisms to come in. Now, how do these mosses get here? Typically they're spores that are carried to the rock, deposited on the rock by another plant or by another animal. And luckily for lichens and mosses, they don't need soil to grow. They need some water and light, basically. And so you have these organisms that are breaking down pure organic material from rock. And the next thing we do is as soon as you get enough soil base, you move to the next step of succession, where you start having small shrubs and plants.
Hey guys, Miss Stone here. So we're continuing on with ecological succession. Mr. Stone just talked about primary succession, where you had a bare rock, probably from some volcanic eruption, and then hardened lava is going to form. And then you have your lichens and your moss. So the key about that was that there's no soil, right? So my job now is to talk about secondary succession, and secondary starts with soil. That's like your, my cheesy thing, secondary soil, SS, okay? So when you start with secondary succession, you have a soil base. You have a foundation of soil, okay? And then you might have, let's say, seeds brought by the wind or seeds brought by animals, and they're going to be dropped on that soil, and then grass is going to start to form, okay? So we're going in steps. So what we have here is, obviously you can't see much grass here at Devil's Den, but we have grass first, and then we have those shrubs and those bushes and those small plants. And then you're going to have things that we call shade intolerant trees. Okay, shade intolerant trees. Well, what's the word intolerant mean? It does not tolerate it. It doesn't like it. Okay, well, what does it not like? Shade. Shade intolerant trees. So you have those trees that are going to be shade intolerant. These are things like coniferous trees, other kinds of evergreens such as pine trees.
So we're up here talking about shade intolerant trees. You can see the forest around me now is completely different than the forest before. You have a ton of pine trees, these evergreens that have needles, that have these lower canopies that don't block out as much sun. You can see there's a lot more grass, there's a lot more plants at the bottom, and obviously there's no other trees like the oaks, elms, anything like that. So these pine trees, these shade tolerant trees, they come first. Then later, these have a shorter lifespan, which allow the shade tolerant trees to show up, basically create a giant canopy, and then kind of block out all the sun for everything else.
As you can see around here at Devil's Den, you don't see very many evergreens or coniferous trees here. What you do see here is really tall trees, and they can form a canopy. I know we're just coming out of winter, so we don't have very many leaves here, but when you get really into your late spring and summertime, you would have this canopy of trees. Well, those are called shade-tolerant trees, because what happened was, as we had the shade-intolerant trees that grew first, because nothing was blocking the sun, right, because it went from grass to shrubs and bushes and small plants, and then your shade-intolerant trees. Well, now, when you have shade-intolerant trees, and if they block the sun, that's fine, because underneath that, you have things called shade-tolerant trees. So those are your last types of trees that grow. Well, they're tolerant with the shade, that's why they can grow. So when your intolerant ones, like we talked about your pine trees and your coniferous, your other evergreens, then if they block the shade or the sun, your shade-tolerant trees can still grow. And those are things like what you see everywhere around here. Those are your deciduous trees, your oak trees, maple trees. Those shade-intolerant trees now are going to die off if they don't have enough sunlight, and they're not going to grow back, again, if you don't have enough sunlight. So that's why you can see all around here, you're not seeing very short or even medium type coniferous pine trees, aka your shade-intolerant trees. All you see is your really tall deciduous trees, because they're the tolerant ones to the shade. Once you get to that last level, that shade tolerant tree level, then you've reached something that's called a climax community. So you heard Mr. Stone saying about the pioneer species being a lichen, that first species that comes to colonize an area, like that white flaky stuff on rock. Well, now we've went through all these levels, and the point where you can start having an environment like this with tons of plants and animals coming in to be established, and your ecosystems start to thrive and grow and to work, then that's called a climax community, which is one of your vocab words. So if we give you an example or a scenario and we say a forest fire comes in and it wipes out your ecosystem, how's it going to grow back? You would say secondary succession, because that forest fire is just going to do that surface level destruction. You would still have soil underneath the ground. Okay, but if we say there was a volcano and it erupted and a lot of lava hardened, what succession is that? Primary, because you're starting from bare rock, there's no soil. Okay, we'll give you guys tons of examples, tons of scenarios to play with, a really good picture to study. But we thought it was really cool to come out here to Devil's Den and to show you what you're learning in the actual real world. Love you guys, miss you, hope this was helpful.
Very interesting. I appreciate that observation, and good job hiking. I don't think I can get out there right now. I appreciate that you volunteering to share your information with us. Let's close out the lesson today. Today's riddle was through thick and thin. That's what I'm here for you, through thick and thin. And our celebrated scientist of the day is Rosalind Franklin, PhD, for her contributions in 1945 helping discover the structure of DNA. So another scientist reaching through the past to help us today, because without the structure of DNA, we wouldn't understand the coronavirus, and we wouldn't be able to look for the ultimate goal, which is a test for antibodies to see who has got this and who is immune, so we can go back to doing what we always do, finishing out, being in the same room with each other and bouncing ideas instead of this one-way video thing. Guys, stay safe out there this week. It's going to be a beautiful week. Get outdoors, do some exercise, go fishing. I'm going to go fishing. And enjoy some of the nature that we're about to study. Wash your hands. Both of them. Be good.